Today we're going to repair and restore a DualShock 4 controller. This particular one is model CUH-ZCT1U. It's one of the original ones, for 4 anyways. So let's get to it. First thing I got to do is remove the 4 screws in the back. There's one here, 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 and here. They are pretty easily stripped, so you gotta make sure that you're using the proper sized screwdriver, Phillips. This is a CUH-ZCT1U, and that you have proper pressure down on it so that it doesn't slip. Alright, with those out of the way, the next thing we've got to do is try to pry this gently apart so that we don't break things. You start by squeezing this bottom part here, not you can see where it separates on the top up here, not there, but right below it. Once you do that, you can see that it separates slightly on the side, and you put in your pry tool right there. Go over to the other side and do the same thing while not knocking the one you just put in out. So I've got my small gap there, and I've got my pry tool in. Going to put some pressure while not letting this slide go back together. It's always cumbersome. On the bottom, you don't want to put it on the top. You want to go from the bottom. And there we go. Hear how that popped apart. You want to make sure to gently pull this top apart. You do have a ribbon inside here that connects this back side to the motherboard, which is on the front side. So you can't go yanking on it hard or you'll tear things apart. Tear up that cable. See the cable right here. There's a little blue tab that's used to put in and pull out. Let's get a hold of that and gently pull it out. Normally these come out together. One of the toggle buttons came out in the back. It's better to come out with the front, but it's not the end of the world as long as it didn't bust the little legs on these here. Want to make sure you retain the spring. It's important. Doesn't seem like much, but otherwise they're not going to have any bounce back on it and they're not going to function properly. This particular one, everything seemed to be working on it except everything was pretty much sticky, which is typical of these. They get God knows what spilled on it. Speaking of which, I once again do not have my gloves on. Alright, that's better. And the next thing I'm going to do is unplug the battery so that we don't end up shorting anything. Not a lot of power in these, but don't want to tear it up on purpose. The next thing that needs to be removed is there's a small screw. I don't know if you can see it there or not. Right here, that needs to be removed in order to pull the motherboard out of the faceplate. Next thing, once again, we've got a ribbon cable. This touch piece up here button is tied to the motherboard with this little ribbon cable right here. You can see it kind of brownish sticking up there. I found it's best to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Tweezers don't seem to have enough surface area to pull it out. Again, it's got a little tab. Grab it, not the ribbon cable itself, and then just gently pull up, kind of rocking back and forth a little bit. Before you try to pull this off, in this particular model, you've also got to press this ribbon cable down. It goes through a little slotted hole in the plastic mount for this motherboard, and that piece that sticks up that you grab a hold of tends to get caught, and you will again rip up that cable if you don't. Make sure that it gets inside the slot before you try to pull it through. And there we go. See, it came apart. And right there's the ribbon cable that I've been talking about. These little options and share buttons are just setting in there and they fall out. So to remove the touch button, you've got to, see it here, you've got to rotate it in and it just slides out. The reason most of the time for the sticky buttons is literally they've got stuff down inside the buttons. To get to the buttons to clean them, you've got these little rubber mounts on the back. They just simply pull off. They wrap over a little edge here and hold on by that. There's really not much to them at all. Same thing over here. They are different shapes, so they'll only go back on properly one way. And also this one down here, which is the PS button. Notice that the edge, there's an edge on one side that goes on the top. Now all you got to do is turn it over and they all fall out. Take a look at the motherboard. I don't see any nastiness or spills, and I did test it before taking it apart. It seemed to be functioning reasonably well. So I don't think we have any problems there. I am going to replace these joystick covers while I'm in there. These actually aren't bad, and I'll probably hang on to them because I'm sure at some point I'll be out of new ones and desperate for them, so I will save these, but I am going to replace them with new ones in this particular time. I'm going to leave the port as is. And looking down in it, there is no damage in the charge port and it's in good shape. There's no spill, anything that looks like a spill in here. So I'm going to leave that one be on this one. I'm going to start by cleaning this outer piece. Get my microfiber. It's not so important on these controllers to use the microfiber, but it is very important on the especially the 1001 PS4s with the shiny hard drive cover. They scratch incredibly easily, so microfiber is your friend and you can get them cheap. I use a disinfectant cleaner on all of my stuff that I do. It's just whatever you choose to use. Just make sure that it's safe for plastic. I would use a disinfectant. These, you don't know where these things have been, so I've sprayed it on there and I'm just going to wipe it off. You have to be careful, of course. Some of the stuff on here, the castings are fragile. This top piece here is pretty fragile, so don't go too wild on it. But this one is not very bad at all. It's kind of surprises me, but often these grooves along the edge here where they fit down into the bottom part of this are truly nasty, and I will use a IPA alcohol, isopropyl alcohol on that to get those clean. In this case, I'm rather surprised. It is really clean. So, got a cotton swab with IPA on it. I'm just going to go around where all the buttons touch on the inside, cleaning out. And one more time, I'm going to give it a good cleaning with disinfectant. All right. I'm going to set that aside. That's done. I'm going to clean the touchpad. There is electronics underneath of here, so I would not be spraying disinfectant down in there. I just put that on the surface and made sure that it didn't get around the corner into the electronics. IPA, of course, 99% anyways, is not conductive, so it's not an issue with it, but it is an issue with the disinfectant. Use some IPA and get around the edges for that very reason. I want it to be clean, but I also don't want to damage the electronics. Alright, that is done. I'm going to go to the back now. The sticker is well intact, so that kind of shows that it's not been used very much, even though it's a Model 1U. That's good. Again, I don't want to get any disinfectant up here on the circuit board for the charge, but I'm going to spray it on the back. This particular model, the filler between the toggle buttons on the back is on the back, molded directly to the back of the controller. Later ones they didn't do that. It's because these break very easily, and then of course in order to bring it back to new you've got to replace this whole back unit, which is not pleasant. It's expensive. And I'm going to use some IPA on a cotton swab, get down in the screw hole. Nastiness builds up there. We want it to look nice. Trying to decide if there's any gunk built up on the light on the back here, whether I need to take that out. I don't see any, so I'm going to leave that be. I'm going to clean just a little around the charging port with IPA again, so that it don't have to worry about shorts from the liquid. And I'm just going to go carefully wipe out the inside. Got to be careful of these little rubber pad looking things that hold the light against the back. Those tear in two, and they're just, all they really are is some kind of adhesive pad that holds this lighting unit to the motherboard, or the not the motherboard, the daughter board that is the charging port. This has a little LED in here, and the light goes up the Lexan plastic and ends up lighting up here. But these hold it in place, and if they tear in two, there's nothing to hold it in place. You can replace it, you can repair it, it's just don't tear it up to begin with, and you won't have to do that. I'm going to turn my attention to the buttons. They're a bit dirty. Had something spilled on them. So I'm going to take IPA, get down on the edges. This is where they stick. And get that all cleaned out. I'll spray it with a disinfectant, although the alcohol should have gotten rid of anything, but just to be thorough. It's good. Clean each little circular button. And then the PS button. And again, to be thorough, I'm going to give them a squirt with a disinfectant. And finally, you've got your little options and share buttons. Making sure to get any gunk off of it that is noticeable or would make it have problems. Another little squirt. Okay, I'm just going to wipe down the little rubber retainers. They've got a don't know if that's a magnet or what. It's got some kind of a metal embedded in the rubber that actually makes contact. Something that conducts across these circuits as they're pressed. So making sure that it's clean. Pay attention to this board now. We've got a little bit of nastiness on it. Get a clean cotton swab. Take some IPA. Again, this definitely needs to be 99% if you can get it. The stuff from the big box places are 70-72%. It's way more water. A lot will cause you problems. I'm going to carefully swab the contact points on the circuit board. Going to clean off a little speaker. Careful not to soak it. Just clean it. I don't see any kind of corrosion around the battery mount or battery connector or the back charging port connector, nor do I see any for the touchpad in looking down on it. So all that leaves is the trigger buttons. I'm going to go around the edges with IPA again, the top. I've got to put this one back together because I wasn't gentle enough and it ended up coming off with the back, but easy enough fix, nothing broke. Making sure to get down in between. You can see a little bit of gunk down on this bottom lip where it tends to build up on the L2. This particular one, the spring is a little messed up. It shouldn't be outside the trigger. And down in its slot properly. So that is correct. You gotta watch, it'll pop right back out. Now do the same thing on the right hand side. It was on the inside little leg. It's difficult to pick up in gloves. Make sure it's on the inside of the button. Put it over on the mid frame with the motherboard. Again, lining up so the spring goes in the little slot. Alright, it went back in that time. So everything's back together. We've got our L2 and R2 back on. So we're ready to reassemble at this point. To reassemble, we'll start with the faceplate. I'm going to put the four-way button in. It doesn't matter what direction it goes. It fits the same all the way around. Symmetrical. So you can see I just put it in like it came out. Buttons through the hole. And in this case, it takes this little rubber mat on the back, hold it in place. You put that back on, you just simply line it up with the edges that stick up and press down until these little holes right here have the there's four of them, one here, 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 and here, have the little plastic piece molding sticking through it, and that the edges of the rubber are over the plastic. The four circular buttons have to go back in on the right order, but they will only go back together in the correct order. Otherwise they will not go down inside. You've got the little triangle on top, and you've got to rotate it until it There's several little legs on it, some bigger than others. You just got to rotate it until it drops down, which is going to put it in the correct orientation. In this case, pointing up. The outer one is the circle. Same thing for it. Different legs, different direction, different size. It'll only drop down into the hole when it's correct. The X goes on the bottom, and I just happened to drop it in exactly right. Again, it won't go in or drop down until it's in the correct orientation. And finally the square, same thing for it, and it dropped right in as well. And then we're going to use this one with the rounded edges for the round buttons. The PlayStation button on the bottom, you got to make sure that it's oriented in the direction that it should be, with the P going up. And again, little rubber backing with the stop on it. There's a piece that sticks out on top that goes up towards the speaker grill, goes up. If you put it on the bottom, it won't go together properly, and that button probably won't work if you can force it together somehow. So the part that sticks down goes up here. These two will go on in a minute, but because there's nothing to hold it in place, they'll fall right out. So let's move over here for a second. This, of course, is the motherboard with the triggers, buttons. I'm going to put new joysticks on that. Again, I get these in bulk from China. You have to watch. Some are better than others. I'm kind of surprised by that, because usually one place manufactures it and they all just sell the same thing. But there are some inferior ones of these out there. Just press it down on there carefully. So, new joysticks. I'm going to put touch back on. Again, you got to go from the back, just hooking it up over the top, otherwise it won't go together. And then finally the two buttons on the side. Again, they'll only go on the correct way. They've got a little slot sticking out. You got to make sure to line up with that, otherwise it will not drop down in there and it's not right. Same for the other side. Alright, so all the buttons are on there now. To reassemble, I'm going to put the mid-frame onto the faceplate, lining up the joysticks with the holes. And in this particular model, there's the little plastic pieces down that stick out here that have to go through the mid-frame appropriately. You also have to line up, again, carefully because it's fragile, the ribbon cable from the touch to go through the little slot that it goes through. Sometimes easier said than done. Pop through. Make sure that it all sits down appropriately. I believe it does. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. Looks like it's lining up across the buttons in the front here. So that looks good. So now I'm going to add the screw back in so it doesn't all fall back out. I think that's correct. Put the ribbon cable back into its little slot on the motherboard. Again, using the little plastic piece that sticks up. And there's a little white mark. It's hard to see even for me, let alone on the camera. but you can see that it's down where it should be on the part that it connects to. Put the battery back in. The battery will only go in one way. There's a little piece that sticks out. It's probably too small to see on camera, but you'll see that there's an appropriate slot that it fits into. Make sure that you get the cables, or the wires rather, for the battery under their little retainers here so they don't get pinched when you reassemble. Another ribbon cable. Again, you've got to be careful with these. They tear fairly easily. The little metal contacts, one side is blue, which is the piece that you can push on. The other side's the copper, that is the contact, goes towards the battery. You have to be careful putting these in, because you can break the cable by pressing down too hard or at an odd angle. It's in. Again, there's a little line that lines up with the top of where it mounts, so you can see that it's in. I'm going to put the top piece on first on this particular model. You do that on all of them, but particularly this one, because you've got got these pieces that are molded into the back thing that have to go over the triggers. So put those over. The little battery fell out a little bit. Go down to the bottom, press the little pieces that are the screws go into, so that they go into the faceplate. A little cumbersome, but you can see it all pop back in. The buttons are all still in place. Make sure before I put my screws in that nothing popped loose. And now I'm going to put the screws in the back. Looks good. Going to go over it one more time with a disinfectant. Well, it looks good now. We need to do the testing. To test these after I've torn them apart and put them back together, there is the best way to test these once you've torn these apart is to, at least in my opinion, is to connect it to a Windows computer by the USB cable that you use to charge on the PS4. Go to the controller that then shows up on Windows, and under Properties you will get a test screen, which is pretty useful in testing whether the values from the buttons are strong enough or correct. So to do this, I'll show you the screen. You can see that this goes all the way around on the outside edges, which means that it's doing fine. This goes all the way up on its axis. Why it doesn't show the X and Y axis is I'm not sure, but none of them do. The other buttons are here. Those are good. These show up here, so the X is 2, the square is 1, the triangle is 4, 3, That's getting a good signal. That one's working. That's getting a good signal. So it looks to me like everything on here is working correctly. And finally, let's give it a try on the shop PS4 here. It's a known good one that I just haven't sold. So, PlayStation button, select button, settings, devices, Bluetooth device. You can see it's had a lot of testing done on it. So showing up there is that. I guess ultimately unplug it, it's connected. Everything appears right to me.